Streaming services are on the rise, and brick-and-mortar video stores are a thing of the past. We have lost that experience of wandering the aisles and stumbling upon a film we've never heard of. We have replaced the familiar face behind the video store counter with an algorithm to recommend films. With more and more content available, it's harder to know what's worth watching and what might be a waste of your time. There are many hidden gems out there waiting to be discovered, and we want to help you find them. This is Trailer Rewind, a podcast where we discuss and review recently forgotten or overlooked films that are now available to stream at home.
You're the boy, aren't you? The boy whose mother was killed.
From the other side.
In today's episode, we are going to discuss The Goldfinch. Today is April 27th, 2021, and The Goldfinch is available on Amazon Prime. So The Goldfinch was released into U.S. theaters on September 13th, 2019. This movie seemed like it was a long time ago when we talked about this trailer on SatMat or whoever. This seemed like, I guess pre-COVID makes it
time has become
feel a long
stretchy.
time. Yes, exactly. It fought for attention against Hustlers, It Chapter 2, Angel Has Fallen, and Good Boys.
Okay, that's a really weird group.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
where,
it is.
Where does this movie fit? I see that you're talking about alternative programming, but first of all, who won, right? It Chapter 2 won of that group, right?
Yes, and Hustlers was up there as well. And,
right, and then Good Boys is a completely different thing. I don't, this is a really weird weekend in movie history.
It reminds me back to a time of we just had too many movies.
Right.
Like we just don't have that right now. We're about to go in that. We're about to get a glut again of movies
Slammed.
that have come out like this. But yeah, it was just sort of like, maybe Steve's about to say something about alternate programming. I have no idea. But if he does, this is even like alternate against alternate. This is like prestige drama against dumb action, against body comedy, against horror. This is like everyone had something to go see, their favorite kind of movie.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. You think about September because you think of sort of the Oscar bait movies that come out in, November, December, that things get positioned. Oh, it's coming out Thanksgiving weekend or Christmas weekend. They're being positioned for an Oscar run. September 13th is really weird. And everything with the cast, the, credentials of coming from a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, you think this would be positioned for Oscars. And they throw it in the middle of September against these things.
I think they knew what they had.
Yeah. Well, there's that. But
Spoiler alert.
Here's a weird question. Do you think because of the explosion and the sort of tragedy thing that they're doing here, do you think they put it close to September 11th?
That September 13th is a
no. And it's in New York. I don't know.
That's bad.
I'm just saying. I don't know. I mean,
what you mean they would put it there on purpose?
Well,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's New York, right? The setting is New York. It's a big explosion. It's tragic. It's dusty nonsense.
Still moving everything away. Stuff.
I
if
would.
There's one
My heart
thing
does.
That
I'm just trying to think of why you put it this week. I think you're right. They knew what they had. We'll talk about that more.
Yes, going against all of these things, if this was to be counter programming of some serious adult, this is your literary crowd. I'm going to go see an artful film. That didn't work because it only made $2.6 million in its opening weekend, and it went down from there. It was out of theaters by the end of October. Total U.S. gross of $5,327,383.
And that didn't even pay Nicole Kidman's salary. So
no, this was like a 50 plus, right?
Without something
50
like
million
that.
plus,
you look at the cast, that it's a long movie, all that. So you think, well, maybe Americans just weren't in the mood for that. So internationally, what happened? It was released the same window throughout September and October. Only brought in an additional $4.6 million. In most countries, it made less than $400,000. I think like Ecuador,
Oh my
it was like
goodness.
$700 it made. The top countries were the UK and Russia, where it made about $1 million in its time in theaters there. Then it was quickly dumped into, at home video on November 19th, and you could pick it up on Blu-ray December 3rd and gift it to somebody for Christmas, I guess was the plan.
And this is interesting because I loved the trailer. I was very excited about this movie after seeing the trailer. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember, who brought it up for their trailer in our show, but I actually think that some of the negative buzz about it is why I didn't go see it.
Yeah.
I think I was affected by that because I had heard what people thought after they saw it. And I was like, oh, okay. I can.
Yes.
I remember two things about this movie. One, that it was one of the few times when they had procrastinated.
Prognosticated.
That's the word you're looking for.
Procrastinated
Or
their
that.
prognostication of that it was going to open at like around between 5 and 7. And then after that first week, they dropped it down by millions. That's very rare.
Yeah.
That means everyone is in trouble. And then the other thing I remember about the trailer, and JJ, I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily, except I'm 100% literally am. I just realized is the one thing I watched the trailer and was like, oh, what Oscar bait?
Yes.
Wait, what is it about?
Yes.
This just seems
Sure.
like my guess was this is going to be a beautifully filmed film that doesn't exactly know what it is, was my guess. Because it seemed like they were really just leaning into, if you've read The Goldfinch, here's The Goldfinch. If you haven't, here's a bunch of pretty things and famous people. And we'll see. Maybe it turned out to be that or not. But yeah, so I remember being suspicious by the trailer a little bit.
Mm.
You have to wonder, cause and effect, all that. Is it a timing thing? What is this movie that, again, is it something you have to see in theaters when you've got other, big explosions, all this? Is this something people like JJ would say, well, I'll just wait and see it at home. I don't need to see this in a big theater. I can see it at home and I can be fine with that.
I
And
don't think it can be word of mouth because it made less than $1 million on its first day.
Yes.
The weekend.
Yes.
That's not word of
Oh.
mouth. That is
I think that's what it's up against.
right.
I think that's
sure.
it coming in hard and blowing things out. I mean, that's what we did that weekend, right? For the film board, we did it chapter 2.
Yeah.
So we had the choice and we chose the other.
That's a good point.
So that's
right. We
think
said,
about it
what
that
is
way.
the movie
And-
that everyone's
and-
going to be watching? And none of us raised our hand for the
The
Goldfinch.
Goldfinch. No.
And we were right.
Correct. Hooray. So
Because it chapter 2 won the
talk
weekend.
about
So there we go.
successful procrastinators. I still don't know the word.
So Tommy, you said, again, something beautiful looking at the trailer, beautiful to look at, but what is it about? And I think that can be one of the challenges when you adapt a book of trying to condense that story. In The Goldfinch, the novel comes in at, 784 pages. So there is a lot
There you go.
there.
Wow.
There's
There
a
you go.
lot there to put into a film that comes in, back in, a long time ago, we might have said this is a really long movie, 149 minutes. So, but coming in over 2 hours is now not uncommon.
Pretty normal.
But
Yeah.
can you condense 748 pages into, something slightly over 2 hours? But maybe
well.
and again, is this one counting on it's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel? Audiences will show up to see that book brought to screen. I mean, is that who this is for? Because the trailer, other than pretty faces and beautiful to look at, if it's not clear what it's about, people aren't going to show up to that. So who do you think this film is for? After having watched the trailer, seen the movie, is this something you would recommend to anyone? Is this? And I guess we should clarify. None of us have read the book at all. So,
right. That's a good point. And I didn't know it won the Pulitzer.
Yes.
Right. That's important too. No, I think it's going to be hard for me to talk about who I recommend this movie to without giving spoilers. But, I bring up the September 11th thing. I think if you stick with the bright spot that I'm going to find with this movie that we're going to talk about later is that if you can sit in negativity for a great deal of time to look for some sort of glimmer of hope, a light message for the full wrapping. I mean, if drama is that for you, right, where you want to process the negative to get to something positive out of negativity, this can be good. And it's pretty, and it's packaged up in that pretty package that you talked about, Tommy. I think there are good things to look at in this movie. It's not a poorly constructed film, but it's going to be really, you've got to be comfortable with negativity and space. And that and that I think a lot of people are going to find as work. But I mean, and I know you don't necessarily want to talk about ratings here, but I'll jump ahead and say that, I gave it 3 stars because I think it's a well done film, but it's a not like for me. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I'll talk about when we get into that. I think it's going to be hard for people to watch it, but if you're okay with drama, if that's something that you enjoy exploring those emotions when you're watching a movie, this might be an okay movie for you.
My wife and I watched this, and it's interesting because she didn't know anything about it going in. She thought it was going to be something completely different, and then by the end, she still, to this day, we were just talking about earlier today, she struggles with this movie. She said there's such potential in here. There are such great characters in here, and there isn't enough. And I said, maybe it is worth reading the book then to get some of that, more of that story, because it is there's so much about the characters, and we've got so many different stories and characters that we just lightly touch on, and we don't really get a lot of that. And so at the end, it's sort of like you had a sampler platter and you just got a taste of everything. And there's stuff you want to sink your teeth into, and the film just doesn't go there. And so, yeah, it's
maybe another 200 minutes.
Yeah. Something. I mean, again, you come back to the, nowadays, would this be a film, or would this be something that would be picked up by Netflix or HBO and done as a series? A limited series.
Oh, sure.
To take this to 5-6 hours. You look at what, how well that Netflix had a success with Queen's Gambit, which, based on a book, and parsing that out over several parts, is this a story that needs that room to breathe? But I would agree. It's very much drama, character-based piece. But yeah, it just falls short for me. And I struggle with the star rating on this of, is it 2.5? Is it 3? Because there's nothing that angered or frustrated me. I wasn't like, wow, this could be so much more. It wasn't like watching Godzilla versus Kong.
Lots angered and frustrated. Steve. I mean, we're gonna.
Okay, we'll get.
I'm very excited to talk about all the things I'm angry about with this movie.
I mean, I feel like there were the pieces there versus like Godzilla versus Kong that I just watched the other day, which was complete garbage, and there's no logic or reason to this. I can see the structure of the story and just feel like there's more that I want, and so that's where I'm like probably going to lean into the 3 stars on this, because I think that it does do so many things well, and it is beautiful, and the performances, I don't have issues with that. It's just that the story was shorted. That's all I can say. But it is, if you like New York, you like stories about family, that type of drama, and in some ways, perhaps a bit of a coming of age story, or dealing with past trauma and tragedy, I think you may enjoy parts of this movie. Overall, I think it's going to be a disappointment because it doesn't do what I think it really needs to do. But the pieces that are there in isolation, I think, can be very enjoyable.
If the question is, who is this movie for?
Yeah.
Or who is going to really enjoy this movie? I believe, having not read the book, but I'm procrastinating, that this movie fails on almost all of those levels. That what they did, that when you're making this is clearly an incredibly complicated story that involves a huge amount of characters, all tenuously connected by like one sort of event. That there's a couple things, if you insist on doing it, this should absolutely have been a limited series, is my personal feeling. If you do it as a movie, you have 2 choices. Number 1, you do it.
There's no episodes. You can't do that. Anyway, go on.
Number 1, you pare it way down and then let the movie breathe and get really deep into the most important parts. Or you do the Cliff Notes version. You film all of the big stuff that you have to include everybody and then rob it of any of its depth. This film chose the second one. And this film feels like a Cliff Notes version of maybe a really huge book because it jumps around so much. I love nonlinear filmmaking. I thought that it used this very poorly. I thought this was the exact wrong reason of how to use nonlinear filmmaking. It spent huge amounts of time this film felt so short and so long, so short on character, so short on stuff, and then overlong because then we have to have this huge pathos scene about being cheated on from a wife or a fiance that we've spent no time with, that we've never seen them together. It's just sort of like pointing at scenes. It's a beautifully filmed Cliff Notes for me. And there's so little to hang on to. I was always still watching because, again, it is truly beautiful and has some of the best low lighting. Roger Deakins, come on.
Oh, yes.
Some of the best low lighting filming that I've seen in a while in ways that isn't flashy, that isn't just candlelight stuff. And we can get into that, I assume, later on where we go into details. But no, I think this movie is just a beautiful failure in what don't do it like that. Don't do it like that. And so I think maybe it would be at best for people that have read the book, a hit parade of
too. We should say that if you liked the book, you should probably check this out just to see. You might see some of your scenes come to beautiful life because it looks how it looks is great, and a lot of the performances are outstanding. As a full film, if you haven't read the book, it's just like it kept going, and then it was over. And then at one point we were in Amsterdam with guns, and I was like, what is this movie? It was just, so I just think it's a really expensive, beautiful failure of vision for something that was almost not possible. You have to pick whether to pare it down and dive in or to do something else.
So how many stars?
There's too much accomplishment for it not to be 3 stars.
Okay.
That's the thing. And so in my Flick Chart rating, it shows up as a 90 out of 252, which actually tells me that it should be 3 stars too.
Wow.
So it actually is consistent with what I was looking for, which is interesting. What happens to the interesting place on Flick Chart that it shows up is it's just below Contagion, which is Soderbergh, which is, my favorite director, and just above The Hummingbird Project, which is literally the last movie we did for Trailer Rewind. And the interesting thing about that is that The Hummingbird Project, it didn't super anger me in the way that the Goldfinch did, but they really follow the same sort of thing in that I think that they're good movies. I actually liked The Hummingbird Project to some degree. I didn't like the Goldfinch, even though I think that they're both the same kind of quality of film.
Okay.
So that's 89 out of 252 for me.
Okay. Tommy, do you have I know you don't necessarily do Flick Chart, but other rating systems that may better calibrate where this stands with you?
I think actually what would make me feel better is to say 3 stars and a not like.
Okay. 3 stars and a not like.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that's exactly what JJ did because I'm recognizing it for its technical prowess.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the director worked really hard. I really loved Brooklyn, which the director had directed before. There's so much talent in this, but the film overall, unfortunately, absolutely for me, just doesn't work. So 3 stars and a no like.
Okay. For me, Flick Chart, I got to do some adjusting because I've got this weird middle film right now. I watched this documentary, The Last Blockbuster, which is interesting about the last Blockbuster store, and it's still going and all of that. It's not
you gave it 100%?
No, it's right in
While
the middle.
You were drunk?
It's right in the middle because the first half of it's interesting about the history of Blockbuster, and then we get into this family-owned sort of franchise, and then it sort of loses ground, focus, and all of that. And so I ranked Goldfinch, and at first I said, no, it's better than that documentary. And then it just got bumped right back down next to The Last Blockbuster. So I was like, okay, let me re-rank and say Last Blockbuster is better, which it's not. And I think it's in the wrong place. And then it got bumped down and it kept coming across things. And I thought, well, maybe it does belong in this lower half. And it ended up at 532 out of 721, which is like in the 26th percentile. But JJ, it ended up just above Tesla that we talked about. It was the first one. Yes, I know. And then below Halloween. Now, Halloween is lower because I just watched it this past
the new Halloween.
No, the original John Carpenter one. Watched it. It is so boring at the beginning because nothing is happening. It's just Laurie goes to school and like there's nothing, and it's all about the last like 20 minutes. And I thought, this didn't keep me as engaged and interested as I recall from back in the day. So it's in this really weird spot. Yes, it's better than Tesla.
Yeah.
I was anger ranking Halloween.
It's crazy.
It probably deserves to be higher. The last blockbuster needs to be adjusted, but that's where it ended up because again, I agree. 3 stars, not alike. It is, yes, that's I think the best way to describe this film. Over at Letterboxd, it has a rating of 2.9 stars based on 23,965 reviews. IMDb, it's a little bit higher. It's at 6.3, which is well over that. They go out of 10.
Yeah.
Right. So if I cut that in half, though, that's still over a 3. So, I mean, I guess between the two, it's right around 3 stars. The IMDb rating's based on 17,000 votes. So yeah, I guess everything you average everything out, it's going to fall right into the middle ground of 3 stars there. So listeners, if you think this is your kind of film and you don't want anything spoiled, or if you don't think this is your kind of film but still don't want it spoiled, this is your chance to pause the podcast and go check out The Goldfinch on Amazon Prime. We all agreed that this is 3 stars and we don't like it, and we can now feel free to discuss our issues with this and why we did not like it, or how we cannot like it and what works, or what, Tom, you said beautiful failure. Is it purely you mentioned the performances. So it's beautiful cinematography, solid performances. You still don't like it.
Mostly solid performances.
Okay, so you guys both brought up this thing of being a limited series. The major problem I have in the first 2/3 of the film is that there is no energy transfer between scenes.
Okay.
So you don't actually, like, this whole thing of like going back and forth in the nonlinear storytelling. There's these drop-offs that really, like, as they go scene to scene, there's no narrative story being told through the nonlinear story, and it's emotionally as you go through.
They're not commenting on each other. And that's the point of nonlinear.
They seem completely non sequitur. And it's just, and it gets into this really weird thing where, like, I had the most difficult time staying awake in the first third of the movie because it was all just kind of this drab confusion about what was happening. And I think that was on purpose based on the subject matter, but it just didn't work. And because of that, it just, I mean, I didn't even know where to go. There wasn't any sort of, the music didn't help, nothing. It just was all this sort of bland tragedy.
Okay.
Turned around in different stories. And that's the point that I was trying to make when I was kind of chipping in when you guys were saying this, could be a miniseries. Where would you make an episode break? I mean, you can't, in the first 2/3 of the movie, you can't, like, there's no individual story arc to any of those little pieces. We're talking about making a limited series just because it's so darn long. But that's not the way that you do that.
But I think not knowing what the rest of the story is are those moments.
Oh, because it's not
there. Everything is so much richer.
Yeah.
Everything has got to have, like, so much
That's an
more.
assumption, though.
Yes, it is an assumption.
It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a pretty good assumption.
Yeah,
I'm shocked. And I will tell you, so none of us have read the book, but I did speak with someone who read the book, and she had to put it down because it's that same sort of thing. It's just tragedy upon tragedy upon spinning tragedy, and that was the part that I had the most difficulty with in the first 2/3 of the film, is that I was just so bored, and that there was never a glimmer of anything except for drug use. And that, I mean, what, like, yippee skippy. Like, and then, okay, this is going to be the best night of your life. Wake up, your dad is dead. Like,
that was all crazy. Yeah.
Oh, man. There's just nothing to grab onto in the first 2/3 of this film.
So let's talk about the beginning, because it starts off in Amsterdam, and we've got Theo talking about, he's, there's guilt, something has been lost. His mother, he had this dream about, he dreams about his mother. She won't look at him and he feels responsible for all of these things. And yes, so what is going on? Because my questions were like, well, what's been lost? What's the guilt that's driving him? He's lining up the pills. He's emptying the little, mini bar bottles of vodka. So clearly, a suicide attempt is coming here. And then we get, that's our intro to him. He's scrubbing blood off the cuff of his shirt. We don't know whose blood that is, what's going on. I'm really disoriented. So I thought, okay, we're going to flash back to something that'll give me the context of this. And then we jump to him getting, basically walked by two adults into this apartment, the Barbers, because we learned that he walked home from this event, and was at home by himself. And so there was an explosion at the museum he was at with his mother. And we spent all this time with him at the Barbers and the odd family dynamics of this wealthy family. He and the Barber's son, one of their sons, Theo, and he were friends in elementary school, but they've grown apart. They haven't really talked with each other. So we've got this family's going to adopt him. And I thought, okay, we get some interesting family dynamics. We see the Barber's household is all these beautiful antiques and artwork, and they clearly have money. At one point, Mrs. Barber takes Theo back to his place, and you can tell they are not moving in the same circles socially. His is not, single parent raising him. Clearly things are different. I thought, okay, interesting dynamic now of how is he going to fit in with this family, right? That's what I'm expecting in the first part of this story. And,
wow, you thought way more about that.
Yeah, because I thought, I was just locked on the tragedy of like, what is this kid going to do? I mean, the whole assimilation into the different cultures. I didn't even get that far, which it was so hard for me to really sort of conceptualize it because I was so stuck on Theo's dealing with trying to attach myself to something that this character was living with. Well,
and I couldn't because it kept bouncing us back and forth between unrelated scenes.
The one thing that I can think that they went in the interrogation scene, which comes later, again, when he says he's probably concussed, he has trouble remembering things. Maybe the writer hooked onto that with claws and here's a way to make things interesting. I'm not exactly sure. I get the idea of starting with the bookend of the scrubbing blood out of the shirt. I'm older now, and here's all this list of stuff because if you do a really big punch in the first 5 minutes, it gives you time. The film logic says it gives you time to explore. But then no, like Steve was saying, I was kind of doing what Steve was doing, maybe in different ways, but desperately trying to find a hook. What are we doing? So what is this story? So why do I care? So where are we going? And instead, it was just sort of
it became Boyhood.
Yeah, you just cut up your scene thing and threw it up in the air.
Right.
And then put it together because there weren't comments. They weren't jarring. At times, like the movie The Father, starring Anthony Hopkins, which he just won for the Oscars, is very nonlinear, very about that. But it's very whenever you learn, oh, we're actually back in that scene, it is shattering. This time it's oh, we're still at that dinner?
Right. Yes.
Who cares?
Right.
It's like you lost the first draft of the film and they were oh, the showing is in 5 minutes. So you just shoved all of the edit points up there. There doesn't seem to be any real moments. And then it just ends up being just a bunch of young Theo who unfortunately I did not find very strong.
No.
He's not a very strong. And then Nicole Kidman just sort of staring at him weirdly over and over, scene after scene after scene. I'm if young Theo's not giving me anything and Nicole Kidman's not giving anything, I'm so sorry to overtalk. I think I'm just got so excited about what you said, Steve, is just, where is my foundation? What am I looking for? What am I holding on to? And that makes sense, JJ, that you find it so boring of I have no footing.
No, you don't. You have, you get when Theo goes to school, talking with his friend Tom, that we find out a little bit about, so what happened was there was something with cigarettes and they got called to the principal's office and that
Tom
they,
Cable. Yeah.
yes. So we get a little bit of, something which for me, the cigarettes are they like just this MacGuffin thing, because
there's so much smoking in this movie.
There is
they
ton
smoke
of smoke
constantly. It's like they made this movie in the 20s. Like what? Nobody does that anymore. What? I mean,
in Europe though they do.
But but they're outside the antique shop and they're smoking. Like, why do you choose to do that? There's obviously a reason for it. There's no, I mean, because people don't do it. So like, we're having a smoke break.
Everyone in the Secret History smokes all the time.
Yes.
It might be a Donna Tartt thing.
Same
yes.
author.
And it is. And
yeah.
it's the, when you look at the dynamics of the Barber family, because we get the scene where Theo first gets there, and then the dad, Mr. Barber, comes in. He's like, my father would say this might be a time for a good little nip, and it's just like you're trying to get the kid drunk or whatever. But then it's like I'm assuming this is one of these things for the readers of the book. Is there more about the family, the whole dysfunctional family of dad's, drinking? We learn later on he's bipolar, all of this stuff, but just the tension.
We learn later on.
There's tension in the family of we've got the whole older brother thing that comes down for breakfast the one time and is just like
the one time.
Yes, but
I guess he does come back.
But again, we get all these pieces, and I feel like there's a whole story that is in the early part of this book about this family of Theo, sort of as an observer of this dysfunctional, wealthy family, and there's, I'm assuming, enough story and conflict in there to push that along enough till we get to the point where Theo's going to take his next steps and he's going to follow up on the ring that he's got. And that's where we meet Hobie and Pippa, who is the girl that was at the museum with him. We get more of that story. That's the whole introduction into the antiques and all of that piece. And we get a little bit more about the event. And for me, this I started to get really interested in, because as Theo, we have that scene with Hobie teaching him about the difference between an antique and a reproduction. And I'm like, this is really interesting. Feeling it, you can see the difference. And it's like, is this something about being able to tell like authentic people from fake people? Are the barbers fake people or are they authentic people? Is there something about this? What are the lessons that Theo's going to learn here? But I don't get any of it. Right.
There's no payoff.
Yeah.
And that would be wonderful. If that was the message of the film, that would be wonderful. But really, all of these sort of differing points, they give you the feeling like that the story was put together with like refrigerator poetry pieces, where you're like, okay, the antique stealer and the fraudster and the rich family that loves sailing all get together with the bipolar dad who wants to get his child drunk. I mean, it really is super. Yeah, it's really confusing, and I'm sure the book is not the same way as that. But honestly, you look at these, and they are all very particular characters with affectations that are just given short shrift consistently throughout the first two thirds of this film.
Well, this is when he followed the ring to the ringmaker.
Yeah.
Is when it really became, I was like, oh no. I was like, oh yay, oh no. Because I remember what it was like. This became, I believe it was called Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Incredibly Loud and Extremely Close.
Oh, is that it? Incredibly Loud and Extremely Close? Almost too much loud, and boy, oh boy, back up.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll never know.
It's
Either
one of
way.
my favorite books.
It's what
Jonathan Safran Foer.
Yeah, the book it's about a young
Extremely
boy.
Loud and Incredibly Close.
So that's what I said.
Yes, you were right.
Okay, so because of a huge tragedy, a young
But that's
person,
a real tragedy.
Hold on. No, of course. No, hold on. Well, if you believe it was an inside job, just kidding. I just had to go there because you yelled. It's a real tragedy. What I'm saying is that a young person goes out in the world and connects a seemingly very disparate amount of humanity together because of one thing coming from a loss. And why I said, oh, yay, was because I desperately love that book. And oh, no, because the movie was this movie. It's the same problem. They robbed it of all of its deep humanity. They took away any of the patience. time with the characters that he just sort of, I mean, in the book of Incredibly Loud, Extremely Close, we'll never know. It doesn't matter. Is, he just sort of, he talks about what heavy boots means. That heavy boots is like an emotional thing. And in the book, someone even says, looks like you're wearing heavy boots, kid. Like, who is that for?
Right.
Readers of the book will hate that. Viewers of the movie who haven't read the book don't understand what you're talking about. I just don't. Yes. And that's what this movie ended up becoming. Yes. What I assume it's from the book. I assume if I read the book, I would see this movie and be like, oh, gross. You just put all the characters in it.
Right.
But why are we supposed to care about them?
Well, and this is less good than that for the reason that this is a fictionalized tragedy, right? So the keystone of Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close is 9/11. And that's something that everyone who was alive at that time can relate to because it's such a keystone event in all of our histories. But this becomes just another piece of that refrigerator poetry stuff in that you have this fictionalized tragedy that we have to assimilate the emotions that are associated with it, which the film doesn't do anything to help us with, unfortunately.
No. Oh, that's true.
I mean, you cast Jeffrey Wright as Hobie, and I'm like, okay.
Jeffrey Wright.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Exactly. I was like, oh, okay. This was just the prelude to where our story's really going to get. And it's going to be the relationship of this man who's sort of taken him in, and it's this coming of age thing and what he learns and all this. I thought, okay, this is going to be great. This is where we're going to spend all of our time. And he's there.
Yeah. Yeah. Could the rest of the movie just be about like learning about restoration and stuff? I would actually find that fascinating.
Yes, exactly.
That's great.
But we don't. And then then we get, all kinds of things of, oh, maybe the Barbers are going to adopt him, and he comes back and, Mrs. Barber's like, oh, I've got a surprise for you. And it's like, oh, look, it's your dad and his...
the two most ridiculous parents. Both of those actors, well, one of those actors is very good, but both of them were...
I like them both. Sarah Paulson was amazing in this role.
I like Sarah Paulson. That's what I said.
In this role, this was a huge departure. I know.
No, but both of them coming in and being like, hey, everybody, I made you a cake made of cigarette butts. Yes. They were so over the top of like the opposite of the Barbers. It was a little gross of like, I'm so sorry, I used one of your paintings as toilet paper. And you're like, look, no one's that trashy, Las Vegas. Well, it was a bit much.
It is. So his father, played by Luke Wilson, and his girlfriend Xandra, played by Sarah Paulson. They take him back to Vegas, and he's there in Vegas for a while. And this is where we get our first shift. So he's sort of there at his new home or whatever. And he goes out back to the pool, and he's going to jump in the pool, and then like the lights go out. The power, whether it's lights out. They're in a neighborhood where there's nobody else living there. The recession, all of that stuff. So the power goes off. No lights in the pool, and then a flash to the museum. He's covered in ash. He sits up in the ash, and then that transitions to older Theo sitting up in the bathtub. And I thought,
Ansel Elgort.
So then I thought, okay, why is this a transition point? Is this just where the book shifted? Because Tommy, as you said, there's nothing thematic. Where is Theo, young Theo, in his place in Las Vegas? To why does it make sense to now switch to older Theo? Now we jump forward in time. He's in New York. We get his whole speech about his tailored clothes and all of this stuff and his success working, in the industry. But there's no thematic or logical connection of why we would jump from this point to the other than we're just going to skip forward in time for some reason. And that really frustrated me because I thought, I don't know where I am or why I'm here, other than Theo's now older and we're going to learn about his life in the future without knowing anything about how he got there.
That's what I mean about energy transfer. There's no energy transfer from one scene to the next, and that really hurts the film.
Energy, yes. And it's just, we plot along with older Theo. We learn that, okay, one of the buyers of furniture is going to accuse him of fraud or whatever. He sold him a piece that wasn't an actual piece. And again, where is that story going to go? Did he do it? Did he not do it? What's going on? We see him run off to his little storage unit where he's going to go like check on his little package and do some drugs.
Do some
drugs. And then we go, Then we go back to young Theo.
so many
and
drugs
I
in
like
this
to do
movie.
drugs and hug my unwrapped packages.
Yes, exactly. But then we jump back.
Typical druggy behavior.
Then we jump back in time, back to Vegas, where he's at school,
Yep.
and Boris is there, Finn Wolfhard as young Boris, and so then we get the whole thing with Boris and Dad's gambling stuff, and Dad's trying to scam him out of money, and all of these things, and then in between there somewhere we get this memory of him stealing the painting, and this is the thing that we paused the film and. My wife and I had a conversation because we saw a scene earlier where he's in the museum and his mom says, "Oh, I'm going to go." It's during the police interrogation when his mom says, "Oh, I'm going to go over here." And the police ask, "Well, why didn't you go with her?" And it's like, well, he's looking at this girl. And so he's looking at this girl and the girl sort of looks at him and they're all looking at the painting. And my wife says, "Are they going to steal this painting? Is this like a kid heist movie?" And I thought, no, it's not. It could have been. It could have been interesting. And I said, "Well, why would kids set off a bomb?" She's like, "Well, the old guy's in on it." I thought, okay.
Oh, she really thought that they were
Yes, because she's like, I don't know where this movie's going.
because she's looking for
A
a hook.
hook on everything.
Yeah.
And not a hook.
We need
Right.
something.
She's looking for a I shouldn't keep saying hook.
Yeah.
She's looking for a
Handhold. Yes. I'm like, where am I?
Just so I
Yes.
know where, or so at least even if you're going to give me twists, I at least think that maybe it's this. That's
Right.
what this film is missing,
There's
right?
none
It's
of
not.
that.
It's
There's
we
none
we
of that.
learned that after the explosion, and he's next to this man who's injured, concussed, and is Welty is rambling incoherently, and Theo takes it as, "I got to take this
That's
painting."
a rough, beautiful scene. Only because I'm an enormous, gross not fan of well-written head injury
Okay. Yeah.
people. I'm sorry, that's a horrible
Yeah.
way to say all that.
Yeah.
But like to describe the mental scramble
Yes.
of that with
Yes.
saying things like they turned all the light bulbs off
Right.
is just there's something so beautifully
Creepy.
macabre and
Right.
and seemingly honest about that stuff
Yes.
when it's written right.
Yes.
For me, this was written very
Oh
right.
yeah.
So, Tom, you alluded to it at the beginning of our talk here. This was a perfect scene in this film.
Yeah.
I mean, everything from the way it was shot, it was gorgeously filmed, and of course it's tragic, but it's silent, and it's the confusion and all this stuff. Like Steve, you immediately said he stole the painting. I never once felt like he had stolen the painting throughout the film. Like, but of course, he stole the painting. You're
yes.
right. But at no point, Welty told him to take it. And this is this young child who doesn't know anything. And, this is going to point to the ultimate message of the film, which I actually really like, even though I dislike this film, is that the message that this piece here connects us to the end of the film where, again, this is all done so beautifully and so wonderfully. And it's very innocent. And it's very that macabre piece that you're talking about, Tom, is so wonderful, and it's really special. And this shows off Deakins. I mean,
yes, yeah.
I stayed around to the end just to see who the DP was because of shots like this, and I was like,
of course,
yeah, okay, Deakins,
yes.
yeah, now I get it. So that makes sense. But I love this scene. I thought it was perfectly written. I thought it was perfectly shot. I thought it was the emotional point that I wanted through all the other parts of the movie.
Yes.
But we didn't get that.
Well, it goes downhill from here. And this is where things sort of go off the rails because
they put it so late.
Yes. No.
Yes.
And we didn't even know why he cared about the Goldfinch because they literally the last second of the movie, his mom says, "You know what? That painting's pretty good. Hope I don't die in an explosion." I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, yeah, it's just,
Yes.
they're just the nonlinear stuff. Some of it really works against.
Yes.
It's
because we had that beautiful moment. Then we get Dad's trying to steal money from him. That whole thing of like trying to access the private account that he can't. And then he runs off with Boris. They drop acid. They come back home. Dad's dead.
Oh, that acid scene was so weird. Is it supposed to be funny? Is it supposed to be pathos? Is it supposed, and then it just runs the gambit of no one knows
right,
what this is.
because then he decides, Theo's like, I can't stay here because my dad's dead and they're going to hand me over to Child Protective Services or whatever. I'm going back to New York. Boris, for some mysterious reason, wants him to wait and can't go with him and says, "Oh, I'll just meet you there." And we don't know why. And then we shift back to older Theo engaged to Kitsy now, and their whole relationship is a sham.
Because
That's just
And who's Kitsy? I mean, honestly, up to this point, I mean, I know who she is, but my point is like,
no, that's
oh,
the
and now
point.
there's this Kitsy person. Yeah.
She's the other blonde girl, JJ. Remember? And pretty people definitely, they don't need like depth of character because they're both
Evidently.
beautiful.
right. Yes. And so, we get Theo just wandering around New York. His girlfriend loves somebody else, and Tom Cable and whatever. And he's just sort of.
She loves literally the guy who crapped on him, and it's his fault that his mom is dead. Like, this is where the story is so convenient. It's just so hard
but
to
at
swallow.
least he ran into Boris for good
Well,
reason.
yes, because he went to go looking for drugs in some weird Russian bar and just happens to, the person he's supposed to meet isn't there. And just so happens that Boris is there, and that Boris has the confession of, I took the painting. Wait, you never opened the package all this time? And then I thought, why did Boris take it? And, and Theo's like, nobody knew about it. Boris is like, you're a blackout drunk. You showed it to me on Thanksgiving. And I thought, okay, still, you're like a 14-year-old kid. Your friend shows you, I took this painting from the museum and I keep it hidden here. So then you're going to.
I hope I'm a Russian crime boss.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That I can use it as collateral for drug deals. And yeah.
I didn't end up doing it, but Steve, I was going to ask you to pull that one thing of like, why did you come into this bar looking for me? I didn't. It was an accident? Yes. Okay, accident. That could be the trailer. That could be like the log line of this film after a while.
Yeah. And the whole conceit about a rival antiques dealer finding a news story about a supposedly destroyed painting being used for collateral in a drug deal in Miami, making it so that he can accuse Theo and Hobie of actually owning. I mean, there's no way to connect those dots. That's what? I mean, it's not. First of all, it's not real. I mean, it was real, but like, how does the painting connect to Theo? Why would this person think that?
Well, because he knows that Theo was the kid that survived the museum explosion. Because he was in the news. He was in the news as the kid that survived that got taken in by the family. Which
that one weird article.
But he makes this line. He says, "So this is evidence of the fact that it survived." But then he takes the leap of, so it must not be in Miami. It must be with you guys. What? Doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, then we get on this, like, that whole confession from Boris now kicks off a whole thing of like, we're now in a Mission Impossible movie. We're going to go to Amsterdam and we're going to go get the painting back. I know these guys, and we're going to go to Amsterdam and you're going to pose as this wealthy American, and we're going to go get the painting back. And then
and now the film is at light speed.
Yes, and then things go wrong, and people are shot, and Theo tries to kill himself because the deal went bad, and so now the painting's gone. They won't have a chance of getting it back, he assumes. So he's going to try to kill himself. All of that. Boris comes in, saves him, walks him around, and then it's like, oh, look.
Walks him back and forth. He actually walks in one direction and then turns him around in the street and starts walking in the other direction. There's no...
But don't you get it, JJ? Goldfinch. Just kidding.
I'm trying to figure out how much time has
passed.
The
most cinematic raid ever happens off camera.
Right.
Boris relates the story of like, here's these things that I set into motion, I guess, over the past 5 hours or something, because I don't know how much time has passed, or a day maybe. I don't know how long between the bad deal and then Theo going back to his apartment to kill himself. Then Boris just sort of says, oh, look, it's all okay. Right. Well, I guess I should say there's more to that. And Tommy actually asked us to pull a clip from this movie, which it's an interesting moment because it does sort of lay things out as far as Boris's, I guess, understanding or rationalization, or I don't know. Tommy, how would you set up this clip, or how would you describe this moment that you selected?
Boris is explaining to Theo how all of this, and the screenwriter is using this to say how all of this was possibly worth our time. And it doesn't resonate for me. It feels like a beautiful, beautiful lie.
So we have done bad things. But maybe sometimes good can come from bad. If I hadn't, maybe none of these paintings would be found. Maybe he's like huge fucking weather system rolling over and we just get blown, and maybe he's fate, or I give name. Just life.
That's what I hoped. That's what the mission that I hoped this movie would have done, and it didn't. That this idea of all of these crazy, disparate people coming together and stuff saved a couple paintings or something off screen. Magnolia is a film that the world, all of these different people come together and have different situations. The book of Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, everyone like learns and builds and their lives explode because of this one thing. This is not that. It doesn't feel at all like that, especially not with a bunch of off-screen cops finding a bunch of off-screen not named paintings. They just say Rembrandt and saying, see, it was all worth it. Good comes from bad. F off. This was 2.5 hours and almost none of this needed to happen, Justin.
So that's where, so it did resonate with me. And
Okay.
that's the point. Like, but I don't think you're wrong. I don't disagree with you. It's just the point of the thing when I was talking about who I recommend this movie to, I was talking about the fact that if you really want to take heart in that the negative things that set things in motion can lead to positive outcomes, that is what they're telling us in this audio clip and in this point is that is the purpose of this story. And while I don't like the story and I don't like the way it was executed here, I like that purpose. I like that,
I
that
love
story
the sentiment
being told. Right. And that's my point is that the
Yes.
sentiment is told. And you think about, so I want to connect it back to the explosion scene that we have here and that sort of innocent point where he actually takes the painting and he walks away from it. This is, maybe it's his shame, maybe it's his trauma, it's all of these things. But what they're trying to sum up in this little tiny piece of the last third of the movie is that it had purpose in life and that you can take solace in the fact that all this negativity was not for nothing. And that's and that's a story that I think is worth telling. I don't like the way they did it, but and I don't want to say it redeemed the film for me, but I actually didn't mind the pace of the last third of the movie. If they would have made most of the first 2/3 of the movie that pace and maybe cut the film, they went the other direction than we're talking about, not enlarged it, but actually cut and shorten it up and made it paced in a different way.
Like if we followed the painting. Is that what you mean?
Or have some sort of vehicle with which we can tell that story. I think that story is worth telling. So it is a story that resonates with me, but I agree with you. It wasn't earned. I agree with that.
No,
100%.
and I think the problem is that it's not only an off-screen thing, it's we've seen this personal tragedy affect many people's lives, and the good that comes out of it is these lost paintings were found. So what does that mean to any of these people? What does that mean to the world that these lost paintings? Does this save the world from ending? Does this, how does this transform the world for better because these lost paintings are found? And that's the thing that I think where it really falls short of. Bad things can happen, but it's got to be an overwhelmingly redeeming good that comes out of those things. Did Theo overcome his drug addiction and find meaning in his life or something because of this? I mean, I struggled to, Tommy, as you alluded to, we don't understand what the significance of this painting is for Theo until the very, very end, where we get that scene at the very end where he's standing there with his mother and she says, this is my favorite. So yes, okay, that is perhaps him clinging to the memory of his mother. I don't know. Is that why it's so unsettling and upsetting to him when he loses the painting? He feels he's losing that connection to his mother. None of that is conveyed either visually or told to us through dialogue or anything. Because I went through this entire movie wondering, why is this painting so important to him? I thought it maybe had something to do with a conversation of why he had to take that painting, that this painting needed to be saved.
With that guy?
Yes, that it needed to be
Right.
taken.
With Welty,
Welty told him to take it because there's something important in that painting. But no, there's nothing there because he never shares it with Hobie or anything. And so he holds on to it. So I assume it's personal. And we don't get that at all until the very end. And for me, that's not enough either of this reminded you of your mother, I guess. So you kept it and you kept it wrapped and hidden away. And you would occasionally go and, I guess, confirm that it was there. But again, then you lose it and the world's better because your actions caused a handful of lost paintings to be found. And I can't.
It's using it as a rosebud.
Sure.
From Citizen Kane, but not in a fulfilling way, because there's way too much other. It's like Rosebud. It's like Citizen Kane, but also an art heist, also like guns and all of these things and whole other families and stuff. That's why Rosebud worked. To say Rosebud and the whole film kind of be like, what is Rosebud? Oh, it all went back to his childhood in Citizen Kane. This said, yes, let's do that, but also cram 8 other movies into this situation. So the meaning of Rosebud, who cares?
Right. I mean,
after a while anymore, it just sort of gets lost.
Right. So we've got Pippa, who was involved there, who, used to, was a musician, can no longer play, can't even go and watch the Glenn Gould, documentary. And that's upsetting and unsettling to her. So she's lost her dreams. Hobie, because of what Theo did with the whole scam con with the whatever, selling the one drawer is something, now it's possibly ruined, Hobie's credentials in the community of a restorer that passes off, things as things that they're not. So we've got Pippa's future destroyed, Hobie's livelihood at stake. Again, as JJ said, tragedy piled upon tragedy, and it's all worth it because we found some paintings. And I don't understand.
We found a Rembrandt.
And and I guess maybe that's rewarding for Theo because again, his mom went off to look at a Rembrandt and that those things that were meaningful to his mother are maybe shared with the world. But I can't make that direct connection because I don't know what the paintings are. They are of no personal significance to him and his mother. So why? Why do that?
And I don't want to try to fix the movie, but what if they characterized it as the Goldfinch was cursed and it actually does stay alive to make these things happen, but it causes all this tragedy? There's different ways to tell the story that might be more interesting because this wasn't.
It continues to be, because that's like the Conjuring kind of situation. Yeah. Something that gets passed down. Yeah.
I don't even, there was the moment in the flashback where Theo's there and he's hearing Welty talk about the painting to the girl, and it's about why it's chained to the cage or whatever. I thought, about confinement. There's something that it's like a line of dialogue that is then dropped, forgotten. That whole thread of what was the painter saying with his painting? Is that why his mother identifies with any of that? It may be all spelled out in the book that, because I look at his mother who loves art and then his father, and I'm like, how did these people even live together? What was the nature of their relationship?
He's so 100% aggro, the worst.
Right, exactly. So,
and I know more about the back of her head than anything, and that she's nice because she's not Luke Wilson.
Right, yes. And that's, so those are all the, I guess, as Tommy said, a beautiful failure. There's those beautiful moments that have the potential, but then the potential falls away. And I'm left at the end, even at the end of, okay, I get this question answered. Oh, this is why it was important to him as his mother's favorite painting. But that's it. I mean, there's nothing there. I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this movie. I don't know what, if it is that, good outcomes come from bad things. I still don't feel that's justified because it was imbalanced in one way. So that's where I leave this film in terms of, book lovers, you can have it, I guess. That's, if you like the book, give it a shot.
You can have it.
Take it and see. And I'd be curious. And
dang it, book lovers.
I'm driven to go read the book because I feel like maybe there is the potential. JJ, you say you've got somebody that read it that it's not there, and
put it down.
They put it down.
She put it down because it was too negative.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't. I get it because of what I saw at the beginning of this movie.
I loved the idea, and I wish I could have felt what obviously the movie wanted me to feel in the very last shot, which is after all this cross-cutting and this craziness and stuff. It's the inciting incident, which weirdly doesn't happen until like 20 minutes. But it's both, it's the Magoo and the red-haired girl, Pippa, and then Theo and his mother all just looking at the painting. Because after that, everything changes. And I was like, oh, I so wish this was earned.
Right.
What a haunting, beautiful image to then go to black and just be like,
yeah.
Oh, but it just...
Why not do that the bookend? Why not make that the bookend?
100%.
Like, it's such a great shot. Like, it's
so beautiful.
It's so beautiful and poignant, but it's lost because of all the other mess.
There's so much other stuff going on. Yeah. That, I mean, like, if it was just about that or something, if it was this, I mean, Zelig or Forrest Gumpish kind of like this one person going through the crazy world, or extremely loud and incredibly close, this one big inciting incident changing all of these different people's lives that would never, it wasn't any of those. It was a bunch of rich jerks and a bunch of okay other people and a bunch of trashy a-holes. and then we went to Amsterdam with guns.
Yes.
It's too much. It's too much and reflexively too little.
Yeah. Well,
and so to end on that thing of like, I wish that this meant something to me, but instead I don't care. And I like so many of the actors in this movie.
Well, maybe it would have done better that opening box office if it had been titled, and then we went to Amsterdam with guns. Because people may have shown up for that type of
Oh, that's interesting.
If you just highlighted the heist, you know, the 5 minutes of the heist and put that in the trailer and called it that, then people may have shown up for this movie.
Yeah.
JJ, closing thoughts?
Well, I echo what you guys are saying. And for me, I mean, after everything we talk about, it seems like it's high on my flick chart. But that's the point that I guess I want to make, is that the message of the movie is a message that I can get down with.
Yep.
And it's shot beautifully. So it's the kind of thing I want to stick by the thing that we as a group all said. It's a 3-star movie, but I didn't like it. And beyond that, I'm not going to recommend it to anyone unless they're curious about how the book was adapted for the screen. But otherwise, it's one of those that you're going to get more frustrated with than you're going to.
So JJ's going to hang around at bookstores.
Agree.
Next to the Goldfinch, being like, "Yeah, you should watch that movie." Anybody else? No, but you're picking up that book. You go watch the movie after. See what it's like. You're the only audience.
And I'm
going to
go back to my every weekend Goldfinch fetish party and be like, "Hey, everybody, I found out what JJ and Steve had to say," and they'll be like, "JJ, Steve." It's a very specific fetish party.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, it is. It's yes. This is It is the 3-star and not alike, and it's one that I won't watch again. JJ, I think emotionally, it reminded me of Papillon that we just talked about on the show, of a movie that should have had this emotional build to something, and then you're just left there like, well, yeah, that happened, and I've just felt short, of that.
It reminded me of Cloud Atlas in that way too, where there's all these stories and you never get a handhold, like Tommy's thing here. You never get a handhold for where you're going with the film. So, yeah, a great adventurous try, but unfortunately a failure.
That's where we are with the Goldfinch. And next, JJ and I are going to be talking about the third bird-titled movie in our little mini-series here, when we talk about The Peanut Butter Falcon, that is available on Hulu and Amazon. So, Tommy, we had last time we talked about the Hummingbird Project. We did the Goldfinch, and we're moving on to the Peanut Butter Falcon. And is
that Shia LaBeouf?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Oh,
yes.
I've heard really good things about that. That might actually be a nice turnaround.
We will.
Hopefully.
I've heard good
I'm
things too.
hoping that we end this little bird trilogy on a upswing, with updraft, I guess you call it.
And luckily, Shia LaBeouf isn't problematic at all. So that won't be anything to tap dance around.
No, not at all with him. So, but it's Tommy, thank you for coming and joining us to talk about the Goldfinch. You brought some great insights to this. I was glad to have you as part of this conversation and joining JJ and I and talking about the Goldfinch.
Oh, that's wonderful. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, guys. I love this show, and it was fun to be a part of this. You guys give me a reason to be like, when I was like, I should watch that film, and then I don't. I'll be like a reason of like, oh, you know what? I have a reason to watch that film. And it just makes me, even when I'm not a huge fan of a thing like The Goldfinch, I'm glad I watched it. And I'm more glad to be able to talk about it with intelligent people.
That is the foundation of Trailer Rewind.
Yeah, I love it.
You may have missed this movie, so let's check it out and talk about it.
I love it. And I look forward to coming back.
Oh, yes. We will see Tommy several more times in this season of Trailer Rewind. There's 2 or 3 more times I think he's going to be on the show, so we look forward to that. JJ, we will be talking, coming up about Peanut Butter Falcon, so looking forward to that. Hulu and Amazon Prime. For our listeners, thank you for listening to the show. For Trailer Rewind, this is Steve, JJ, and Tommy. Hondo. At Trailer Rewind, I scour what is streaming to find the films we discuss on the show. Letterboxd makes it easy to find out which services have the films we are reviewing. Letterboxd also makes it easy to locate films we have watched in the past and see our reviews and ratings. The Next Reel team has built lists of films we have discussed for the main show, the Film Board, and Trailer Rewind. Right now, we have a special offer for our listeners. You can quickly and easily upgrade your free Letterboxd account to Pro or Patron status with a 20% discount at thenextreel.com/letterboxd. If you have already upgraded your account, this discount also works for renewals. After you've used Letterboxd to find a film and watch it, we'd like you to be part of the conversation in our online Discord community. To get started, just go to thenextreel.com/discord. And to keep the conversations going and get some great benefits while you're at it, head over to thenextreel.com/membership and become a supporter of the Next Reel family of podcasts. For less than the cost of a movie rental, you can become a monthly supporter and join us for show live streams as we record, early access to shows in your very own personal podcast feed, and access to member-only channels in Discord. Thank you for listening to Trailer Rewind. Hondo.